Welcome to Odoo TV. This time, we're discussing COVID spike protein detoxification. And today, we're going to explore something really critical. It impacts a huge number of people worldwide. We're talking about the whole issue of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. And not just, the initial infection, it's really about what comes after.
That's exactly right. What we're really digging into here is how this spike protein, whether it's from the virus itself or, generated by our own cells after the mRNA vaccine, how it can cause these really profound and often lasting issues.
Okay, and this is where it gets, well, quite concerning, frankly. The data we're looking at suggests that COVID spike protein damage from the mRNA vaccine is extremely harmful, resulting in heart damage and organ damage. That's a very strong statement coming out of the research.
It is, and it's a crucial point that really needs wider understanding. We see in the materials research, including autopsies, it's revealed the spike protein present in vital organs. We're talking brain, heart, liver, kidneys, even ovaries and testicles in cases of death following vaccination. And it's also been found right inside blood clots in these vaccine-induced thrombotic injuries.
Oh.
Yeah, so it demonstrates a pretty direct link between the spike protein and some severe systemic problems.
And the sheer amount, the volume of this exposure. That's significant too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Studies show the levels of IgG antibodies against the spike protein. They are many, many times greater after vaccination compared to, say, a natural infection.
Okay.
Which suggests a considerably more extensive exposure to the spike protein after immunization.
So for the millions, literally millions of people around the world dealing with these persistent, really debilitating symptoms after COVID or the vaccine, understanding this mechanism, it's just paramount.
It really is. But the good news here, and this is important, is that with this understanding, there's a strong rationale now for targeting that residual spike protein as a potential treatment. We're actually seeing some promising paths toward detoxification.
Okay, good. Let's unpack that a bit more. So what does this persistence, this spike protein hanging around, what does it actually do to the body?
Well, it's not just, passing through. It's described as a persistent provocateur. A key issue highlighted is these extensive fibrin amyloid microclots. Sometimes they're called fibrinaloids. They can form in the blood and seem particularly common in people experiencing long COVID, or PASC as it's known.
Right, post-acute sequelae of COVID-19. And these microclots, they're different from regular clots.
Very different. And fascinatingly, the sources indicate they are directly triggered by the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein itself. Once they form these, let's call them anomalous clots, they are remarkably resistant to the body's normal clot-busting processes. Fibrinolysis doesn't break them down easily, so they can persist. They can trap other proteins, and even potentially trigger the production of various autoantibodies, which just makes everything worse.
It's amazing how these tiny, tiny things can cause such huge problems. You mentioned they're small, 1 to 200 micrometers.
That's right, incredibly small.
So if you think about it, if these little amyloid things block up your microcapillaries, the absolute smallest blood vessels, they're essentially cutting off oxygen to your tissues, right?
Exactly. It's like creating tiny roadblocks everywhere. This lack of O2 transport, this hypoxia at the tissue level, well, it could potentially explain a vast array of symptoms people report.
Like breathlessness, for instance.
Precisely. If oxygen isn't getting to the tissues properly, breathlessness makes sense. But it goes beyond that. The sources link this to more severe thrombotic events too, like heart attacks, strokes, and then there's the impact on organs like the kidneys, muscle pain, myalgia, and even neurological issues, brain fog, cognitive problems. Plus, the spike protein itself might be directly toxic to cells, cytotoxicity, so it's attacking on multiple fronts.
And it sticks around for a long time. You mentioned persistence.
Yes, that's key. The S1 subunit of the spike protein, the part that binds to our cells, research indicates it can persist inside certain immune cells, these CD16 plus monocytes, for potentially up to 15 months after infection.
15 months. Wow.
Yeah. So this continuous presence acts like a constant low-level stimulus, likely amplifying that microclot formation over time. It helps explain why conditions like long COVID can become so chronic, it keeps that inflammation simmering.
Okay, so if these clots are there, how do we actually know? Can they be measured?
Yes, they can. The sources describe using platelet-poor plasma, a simple fluorescence microscope, and a specific stain called theoflavin T. It lights up these amyloid structures.
Okay.
And we also often see elevated D-dimer levels in these patients. D-dimer is a marker for clot breakdown, so high levels suggest significant clotting activity is happening somewhere in the body.
Got it. And you mentioned these kinds of clots aren't unique just to COVID.
That's a really interesting point raised in the material, yes. Similar amyloid microclots have apparently been observed in other chronic inflammatory conditions, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, type 2 diabetes, even rheumatoid arthritis,
Ah,
which sort of suggests maybe there's a broader mechanism at play here involving these protein anomalies and various chronic illnesses. It's a fascinating connection.
a reminder that you're listening to OOTO TV.
So, given everything we've just discussed, this persistent damaging nature of the spike protein, the sources really converge on an important possibility. The idea that COVID spike protein detoxification is possible with a specific protocol, this really offers a tangible way forward for people struggling with these long-term effects.
Well, that sounds incredibly hopeful, especially for people who feel like they've hit a dead end. You mentioned Dr. Peter McCullough and his colleagues.
Yes, their work is highlighted. They propose what they call an empirical strategy, a triad of natural substances. It's based on their understanding of how these compounds might interact with the spike protein and counteract its negative effects. It's about using nature's tools.
Okay, a triad. What's the first component?
The first one is nattokinase. It's an enzyme, comes from fermented soybeans natto. Its main job is proteolytic, meaning it breaks down proteins, and crucially, it has strong thrombolytic properties, clot dissolving.
Right.
Lab studies have actually shown nattokinase directly degrading the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. And in people, taking it seems to elevate markers like D-dimer and fibrin degradation products, which indicates it is breaking down clots in the body.
Okay, that's promising.
Yeah.
Is there a suggested dose?
The sources often mention a dose of 2,000 fibrinolytic units, or FU, twice a day. It has a pretty good safety track record, especially in Japan, where it's used for cardiovascular health.
Okay, nattokinase. What's the second part of the triad?
Second is bromelain. This one comes from pineapple stems. Like nattokinase, it's proteolytic, breaks down proteins, but it's also known for being a powerful anti-inflammatory, and it has anticoagulant effects, too.
So it does a few things then.
Exactly. It seems to reduce pro-inflammatory signals, promote fibrinolysis, that clot breakdown process, and help prevent platelets from clumping together. Plus, some interesting lab studies suggest it might inhibit the virus from entering cells and can also cleave or cut the spike protein itself.
So direct action on the spike protein potentially, plus anti-clotting and anti-inflammatory. What's the usual dose for that?
A commonly suggested oral dose is 500 milligrams per day.
Okay. Nattokinase, bromelain. What's the third?
The third is curcumin. This is the active compound in turmeric, the spice. Curcumin is a polyphenol, and it's got really impressive antiviral and, importantly, anti-inflammatory properties.
Right. Turmeric's well known for inflammation.
Exactly. It works by modulating inflammation, inhibiting those inflammatory messengers called cytokines, and computer modeling studies in silico work suggests it might even block the spike protein from binding to our cells, which could potentially reduce replication or further damage. It also seems to contribute to fibrinolysis and anticoagulation, adding another layer to the strategy.
And I imagine absorption is key with curcumin.
Very much so. That's why nano or liposomal curcumin formulations are often recommended, usually at a dose like 500 milligrams twice a day, just to ensure you're actually getting enough into your system.
So putting it all together, nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. It sounds like a really synergistic approach.
It really does seem that way based on the rationale presented. You've got the proteolytic action from nattokinase and bromelain targeting the protein and clots. You have anti-inflammatory effects from bromelain and curcumin calming the system. And you have anticoagulant effects from bromelain and curcumin helping with the clotting issues.
So it's hitting the problem from multiple angles. Degrade the spike, reduce inflammation, and tackle the clots.
That's the idea. A multi-pronged attack aimed at the core issues identified.
A reminder that you're listening to OTO TV.
Now, this leads to a really vital point that comes through strongly in the source materials. It's this. COVID spike protein detoxification success is verifiable.
Verifiable. How so?
Well, while everyone agrees large-scale randomized controlled trials, the sort of gold standard, are needed, and they haven't been registered yet for this specific triad.
Oh.
The clinical rationale is strong. And the empirical observations, what doctors are seeing in practice with patients, they're showing significant signals of benefit.
Yep.
And importantly, an acceptable safety profile for this combination. Clinical practice reports suggest it has shown promise in actually helping remove those microclots and definitely alleviating patient symptoms. So people are feeling better.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So for you, our listener, it's crucial to get this. While these are natural substances, and generally safe.
Hmm.
They do have anticoagulant effects, so medical supervision is really important, right? Especially if someone's already on blood thinners or antiplatelet drugs.
Absolutely crucial. This isn't something to just try haphazardly without professional guidance, but for those who are really suffering with these persistent post-COVID or vaccine-related symptoms, the sources suggest this triad nattokinase, bromelain, nanocurcumin, taken for at least 3 months, maybe longer. It's considered a reasonable empiric strategy.
Empiric meaning based on observation and experience rather than definitive trial proof yet.
Exactly. It's offering a potential solution based on the current understanding and observations, filling a gap where definitive answers might still be years away.
Now, some might push back, right? Call these approaches unproven or say antibodies clear the protein for most people anyway.
Yes, and that's a fair point to raise. The sources do mention viewpoints like those, noting that in vitro results don't always translate perfectly in vivo, and some experts maintain that for the vast majority, the body does clear the spike protein effectively. They argue persistence is rare. But the critical distinction, and this is where the focus really lies, is on those individuals, maybe rare, maybe not so rare, we're still learning, who don't clear the protein effectively, or who suffer from these persistent damaging effects we've outlined.
Right. For them, waiting isn't really an option.
Precisely. For someone suffering debilitating symptoms day in, day out, waiting years for large double-blind trials when there are potential solutions now, showing signals of benefit and reasonable safety, it's just not feasible. The sources really convey the desperation some people feel, and the potential of these natural substances offers them a genuine beacon of hope. It's about addressing that immediate, pressing need.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for you, our listener? It seems this understanding of the spike protein's persistent role, it really opens up new possibilities for treatment, doesn't it?
It really does. It shifts the focus from just managing symptoms to potentially addressing an underlying driver of conditions like long COVID and post-vaccine syndromes.
And the evidence supporting these natural compounds, nattokinase, bromelain, curcumin, it seems quite compelling based on their known actions against inflammation, clotting, and maybe even the spike protein itself.
Yes, the rationale is strong. It suggests a powerful reason for considering their use in detoxification protocols, guided by healthcare professionals, of course.
The ongoing research highlighted in the sources, looking into why these viral bits stick around. It really underlines the need for proactive strategies like this. This triad seems to offer a promising and relatively accessible path to help the body clear out what shouldn't be there.
And maybe think about this. If these natural substances can potentially help your own body dismantle and eliminate the very thing causing so much harm, what does that imply? What does it mean for the future of personalized medicine, for how we handle complex post-viral conditions? It really raises questions about our own agency in healing, especially when we're facing these kinds of new health challenges. How much can we actively do to help our bodies recover?
A fascinating question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on OYUTO TV. We certainly hope this exploration of spike protein detoxification has given you some valuable insights and perhaps a fresh perspective on navigating these persistent health challenges.